Sonnet 130, My Mistress' Eyes Are Nothing Like the Sun, by William Shakespeare. My mistress' eyes are nothing like the sun. Coral is far more red than her lips red. If snow be white, why then her breasts are dun. If hairs be wires, black wires grow on her head. I have seen roses, damasked, red and white, but no such roses see I in her cheeks. And in some perfumes is there more delight than in the breath that from my mistress reeks. I love to hear her speak, yet well I know that music hath a far more pleasing sound. I grant I never saw a goddess go. My mistress, when she walks, treads on the ground. And yet, by heaven, I think my love as rare as any she belied with false compare. So a couple of things, obviously Sonnet 130, so the 130th sonnet of the very, very many that William Shakespeare wrote, and the title is My Mistress' Eyes Are Nothing Like the Sun. And the whole point of this particular poem is not only breaking conventions and being a parody for the typical Petrarchan sonnets that many of the people during Shakespeare's age would have recognized or come to have known or rediscovered. Petrarch, obviously an Italian poet, but many, 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 many years before William Shakespeare. And in those particular poems, there was a focus on exaggerating the beauty of your particular lover, your wife, the person that you adored, etc. So, like I said, in addition to breaking conventions and being a parody of those particular poets, this also does fulfill the typical message of a sonnet or the particular theme of a sonnet, which is love. So generally when you read sonnets, it is about love. If you had to read modern sonnets today, it might not be the love for a woman or a man. It might not be romantic in nature. You could write a sonnet about the love that you have for a particular color pencil or something along that line. But the main idea of a sonnet is to describe your love for someone. But in this sonnet and in many of Shakespeare's sonnets, William Shakespeare turns it on its head. He doesn't agree with the exaggeration, with the hyperbole, with the insincere comparisons that many of the writers and many of the poets used to make about their lovers. He believed that, if we go according to the sonnets, that women should be appreciated for who they are. And yes, they might be ordinary, they might not be particularly stunning or gorgeous, but if you love them, despite all of that, then that is far more real and far more unique than somebody just spouting a bunch of cliched poetry. So, sonnet has 14 lines. We know that it is a Shakespearean sonnet because of the rhyme scheme, the A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F, and the G, G. Typically also it is written in iambic pentameter, but there are some lines where certain words messes with that particular rhythm, that particular beat per line. And that's also part of William Shakespeare saying, listen, I know this is usually the way I do things, but because I'm going against the grain, because I'm swimming upstream, because I'm going against what everybody else is doing, I'm also going to change a couple of the lines in my poem, in my sonnet, and it's going to break that rhythm, just like he's breaking the conventions of typical love sonnets. So it is 3 quatrains and a rhyming couplet. There is the development of the argument, and the rhyming couplet is the conclusion, is William Shakespeare's final word on the matter. If this was a Petrarchan sonnet, we would have the octave, the volta, and the sestet. So one side of the argument, and then considering the other side of the argument, or one way of looking at something, and then perhaps maybe a personal view, something along that line. But this is a Shakespearean sonnet, so you've got these 3 quatrains which are developing the argument, and then we have the rhyming couplet with the conclusion, the final say on the matter. Couple of words to go through for definitions. So we've got coral, and if you think of the Great Barrier Reef, if you think of those very rocky, very colorful parts of under the ocean and under the sea, where there are anemones and little fish and things like that, that is coral. It's the hard, stony substance. It is technically growing. Suppose you could debate whether or not it's alive, but it does grow, but it's very hard, and it's found in warm seas and often is the basis of reefs. Then we've got done. Now, if something is done, not D-O-N-E, but D-U-N, it is dull, it is off-white, it is a gray color. Damasked is a pattern of mixed colors. You could also think of dappled. It seems to be a spotting or a mixing of colors. When you look at roses, and they're not just pink, and they're not just orange, and they're not just red, but they might have a little bit of white, or there might be purple and pink, or there might be the orange and a little bit of green. Then we've got reeks, very strong, very unpleasant smell. Another word you can use is pungent. Then we've got rare. If something is rare, it is unique, it is not common, not easily found, maybe very few. Then we've got belied, which is to be misrepresented. It's not the truth. It's not what it is. And the false compare, number 7, is an exaggerated comparison. It's false because, I suppose in slang it would be extra. It's just too much. It deviates too far from the real thing. Like mountains of strawberries, that's a hyperbole. It isn't really a mountain. It doesn't even make a small hill. And you can say that that is a false comparison because it's not real. But the exaggeration is there in order to give a point, or to highlight just how much this thing means to a person, etc. So false compare, the exaggerated comparison. False because it's hyperbolic, it's exaggerated. So the first line, my mistress' eyes are nothing like the sun, is a negative simile. So normally a simile or a metaphor personification is to compare something to something else. It's like it, it is it, it does something a certain way that is similar. But in this case, the comparisons, the simile, and the metaphors are in the negative. My mistress' eyes aren't like the sun, and her lips are not red like coral, and her breasts are not snow white. Okay, even if you had to think of the fairy tale Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, the woman wishes for a girl as pale as the snow, and hair as black as ebony, and lips as red as blood. Okay, those are positive comparisons. They are in the affirmative. They must be or should be like these things. Yeah, but these are negative. And when you read the three quatrains, it feels very harsh, very blunt. He's not pulling any punches. He's being very deliberate in saying, my lover, my mistress, is ordinary. Now, on the point of mistress, in those days, a mistress would be the person that you love, your darling, your treasure. So it's not a concubine. It's not somebody that, you have on the side of another relationship. Okay, so it doesn't have that negative connotation back in the day. So to go through it, her eyes aren't like the sun, her lips are not as red as coral, her breasts are an off-white color, wires grow on her head, her cheeks don't have that red and white blush in them, perfume smells better than her breath, and even though he likes to hear her speak, music does sound a lot better, and he can't say that he's ever seen a goddess, because even though that's what some poets would compare their woman to, if he looks at his woman, she walks on the ground. Her feet actually touch the ground. So he can't say that he's ever seen a goddess. But despite all of this, and he kind of makes an oath, like if we were to say, oh, for Pete's sake, or for crying in a bucket, or, something along that line. He says, by heaven, okay, I'm making an oath by heaven that my love is just as unique, just as rare as any of these exaggerated things that you can compare her to. Lamb, leave the picture. Okay, so that's his conclusion. Yes, she's ordinary. She's nothing special. She doesn't have this porcelain skin, all the other rest of it. But for William Shakespeare, that doesn't matter. She's ordinary, she's plain, but he loves her regardless. And it's that love for somebody who is ordinary, that real, that sincere, that genuine love, that makes it unique. It makes it rare. So yes, all the contemporary poets, all the Petrarchan sonnets would have exaggerated about their lovers, come up with these far-fetched comparisons of their beauty, and that would be pretty unique. Those things would be pretty rare. But the genuine love that he has for his woman is just as rare. You almost get the sense that if you're comparing your woman to something that actually isn't real and doesn't exist and isn't genuine, isn't authentic, then are you actually loving her? Is it actually true love? Because look at your woman. Is she really that? No. Okay? And I accept that, and I love her regardless. And that makes my love for her rare. It makes it unique. All right. So there are a couple of themes. Escape from idealism. So in every age, there is the ideal beauty, this idea that the majority have of what is beautiful. And if we had to look at Cleopatra, if we had to look at Helen of Troy, if we had to look at Ophelia and these great beauties from different time periods in history, because of our ideal today, we wouldn't see them as beautiful. We would say, what do you mean the face of Helen made, thousands of men sail the seas to fight an army for her? What do you mean that Cleopatra had like 6 different lovers of, high status? We would look at them now and we'd think, no, but I mean, they're not that actually good looking. But in 100 years from now, people are going to look at our ideal of beauty, and it's not going to be that great for them either. So it's escaping from this idealism that there is this perfect essence of beauty. And Shakespeare's saying, no, love the person for who they are. Make the love real. Then there's also femininity. Now, generally, people also have their own idea of what it means to be feminine. Some people might even see it as, something that men came up with, anything really along that line, or something that, shouldn't happen because people have an idea that it makes you weak. But the sonnet addresses the problem of stereotyping female beauty by setting unreachable standards for it. The fixed definition of beauty is unrealistic and will make females inferior by not achieving the real standards of beauty. And this is the issue, and you can even look at society today. There's this whole idea of what it means to be beautiful, and actually it's just undermining woman and what it means to be beautiful. So Shakespeare was also quite ahead of his time in the way that he viewed women, and almost giving them their own voice, their own agency, their own personality. You are an individual. You are worthy without these ideals. And then, of course, love. Okay, love doesn't come from these ideal standards. It doesn't come from these false comparisons. It doesn't come from these insincere thoughts. True love is genuine, and it should be real, and it should be rejoicing in the ordinary and the simple and those kinds of things. Okay, sincerity, appreciative, impassioned, mocking, satirical, all of these have to do with tone. And please, when you are answering a question on tone, yes, you get marks for the explanation, but you actually have to give a tone word. Okay, the tone is sincere. The tone is appreciative. The tone is impassioned. The tone is mocking. Okay, that is one mark. And then you've got to look at figures of speech, or you have to look at the diction, particular words that are used, normally looking at adjectives, and then explain that that is where the tone comes from. Because they chose these words, because they used this image, it gives this tone. Okay, this is what it is doing. Okay, if they ask you diction, what are the choice of words? What words gave the mood, gave the atmosphere, lets you know that it's positive or negative or mocking or cruel or informative? Okay. Then at the bottom of the page that I've got here, I've got 6 stars. So sonnets lend themselves to poetry essays. They have an identifiable structure, they have imagery, they have, fairly straightforward themes and a message, and it just lends itself really, really well to a poetry essay. Remember, for your For those of you writing exams, you will usually get a choice of 4 scene poems, and you will have to answer 2 of them. One of the 4 options is always going to be a poetry essay. You don't have to do it, but it is there. And please, if in the essay they ask you to discuss the structure, if I have to use this poem as an example, don't just tell me that there are 3 quatrains and a rhyming couplet. What is in each of the 3 quatrains? What is in the rhyming couplet? Okay, that information needs to be there. You can also talk about the parody. They might ask you about the parody or the contrast between typical love poems and what William Shakespeare is doing in Sonnet 130. They could ask you questions on the message and the imagery and the negative comparisons. Do you agree or disagree with William Shakespeare's view of love and beauty? And then obviously the information that you have, you will then use to support your answers. Okay, no marks for yes or no. It's for the reasoning. Is it an informed? Is it a logical justification? And yeah, that is it for Sonnet 130.